institution leadership, and he's meeting the chief executive officers of commercial banks and leaders of multilateral development finance institutions to assess basically the progress in efforts to intensify, and this is what we've been hearing, infrastructure investment, which is key. Let's listen.
Go live.
To undermine our national aspirations, and extraordinary measures are required to respond to these challenges and also to return us to a path of growth. And it is against this backdrop that I felt it necessary to convene this extraordinary meeting, for which I really thank you for having responded positively and being willing to participate in. This meeting in itself is an extraordinary meeting in that it is the first time that government, financiers, including multilateral development institutions and development finance institutions, as well as organized business and infrastructure-focused entities and players have all come under one roof to discuss public sector infrastructure in what I would say in a more meaningful way. I have previously described this area of work, infrastructure investment, as a critical driver of our future growth, because infrastructure in itself plays a significant role in a country's economic welfare. I think that is generally accepted all over the world. And the provision of superior quality infrastructure allows an economy to be more efficient. It has the effect of improving productivity as well as raising long-term growth, and it has a very positive impact on raising living standards of people as well. But it does not follow that more infrastructure in and of itself usually translates into higher long-term growth. It is having the right kind of infrastructure that will increase an economy's productive potential. Now, this publication called The Economist calls infrastructure the economic arteries and veins, particularly in the form of roads, ports, railways, airports, power lines, pipes, wires, dams, waterways that enable people, goods, and commodities to move about efficiently. Now, when we come to our own country's infrastructure's reality, we obviously start off with the blueprint that we crafted, which we call the National Development Plan, which commits to certain key targets to be met by 2030, including a 5.5% year-on-year economic growth, 6% unemployment rate, 30% gross fixed capital formation to GDP. However, our economic growth potential is expected to remain below 1%, and this morning Moody's said that we are only going to be at 0.7% this year, and unemployment continues to be on the rise, and we are now at a staggering 29%, with youth unemployment being even higher. Now, gross fixed capital formation remains tepid at only 18% of GDP. Public infrastructure spending, as many of us know, has been declining over a number of years. Currently, it only amounts to about 13% of total spending, when it should be a lot higher than that. The 2019 budget report states that the public investments have been declining recently, and transfers to local government for investment projects are usually underutilized. The fiscal space has been even further constrained by the vast contributions provided to rescue our SOEs, with particular reference to ESCOM as well as SAA. Now, overall, infrastructure investment needs to grow to about 30% by 2030 to achieve our NDP growth targets. Multilateral development banks, development finance institutions, and the private sector all have a critical role in financing and implementing this investment. In recent years, government has witnessed accelerated deterioration of some of the most important assets of our country that are required to improve the quality of life of our people. There's been huge neglect as well in this regard. And the rapid deterioration of municipal water infrastructure, such as wastewater treatment plants and water treatment works, undermines the economy and threatens access to basic services. But it also undermines the operations of businesses, as businesses are located in local government areas. I often say that investments are not made at the union buildings or here in Denehase. Investments are made and are located in our local government areas in municipalities, and where waterworks are not properly maintained, it has a huge impact on businesses but also on the ordinary lives of the people who live in those towns. The disintegration of provincial and municipal roads is another area which affects efficiency of road networks. This also stunts economic growth and increases the costs of transport for road users. But it also causes huge damage to the mobile assets, vehicles, the trucks, and it also leads to loss of life, as many of these cause avoidable accidents. The story of failing power plants is well documented, causing great harm to the economy and raising the country's risk profile. The hemorrhaging of technical engineering and financial skills in the public sector has contributed significantly to the bleak state of public infrastructure. Now, the decimation of these absolutely necessary skills in the public sector has undermined quite a lot of activities like planning, asset management, and just merely the production of credible and transparent project pipeline. The net effect has been the collapse of industry, disinvestment from the country, and erosion of confidence by funders. This is a picture we want to correct, and this is a picture I'm determined we should correct immediately. Because in many ways it speaks to one of the priorities I spoke about last year, of the 7 priorities. I cited the capability of the state as number 6, and I've now corrected myself that the capability of the state actually should be number 1. So all that I've been talking about now is really revolves around the capability of the state. So it is this picture that we must correct. Now, addressing barriers to infrastructure investment is critical to achieve the necessary growth. The most immediate interventions required to correct the situation include, firstly, the creation of technical and financial engineering capability. it is unlikely government will recreate lost skills to the required levels in the immediate term. And it is therefore important to create a legally permissible transitional dispensation to ramp up state capacity in the technical and financial areas. And indeed, that can also be done in a number of other areas. The envisaged dispensation should be premised on private sector collaboration. And this is where the notion of building all these social compacts I've been talking about comes into its own, because it is when we are able to find ways of working and cooperating that we are able to achieve much more. And this is an area that is focused, that is directly applicable to engendering economic growth, where we can work together. The dispensation should seek to steadily recreate the necessary skills in the public sector and target motivated young professionals to see the public sector as an employer of choice. And I should say that a number of young people who are technically trained have come into the public sector, and because of what has been happening in relation to the incapacity of the state, they have felt discouraged and they have left. We need to lure them back. And working with the private sector and various other institutions that are involved in infrastructure, we should be able to lure them back so that they can come and play the role that they were trained for. Now, the second area, we need to develop a detailed infrastructure investment plan. The plan should provide a positive signal to investors and lenders. It should revive the stagnant construction industry and improve skills and institutional capacity across line ministries and sub-sovereign entities to generate a possible pipeline of projects. It should also outline a public-private partnership framework and remove policy bottlenecks in engaging with the private sector. It should strengthen preparation of bankable projects, but it should also be able to mobilize long-term finance and implement projects through comprehensive contract management towards achieving a sustainable infrastructure delivery and service. And thirdly, we need to initiate policy and regulatory reforms. Our public sector policy and regulatory universe is among some of the most elaborate and prohibitive in the world. It has the unintended consequences of delaying and derailing investments at great cost to the economy. I forever remember the email that has been doing its rounds when the coronavirus started happening in China, when they said they needed a hospital. A hospital was built in 11 days. Put aside the issue of the quality and all that. But then somebody who wrote the email then reflected on our own situation. And you are all laughing because you saw it started off with, we need a hospital. They go to somebody, and it could presumably be go to the president. We need a hospital. Then possibly the president says, Minister, we need a hospital. The minister says, no, let's have a press conference first. And a press conference is held, and thereafter they say, no, let's set up a consultation framework. And then thereafter, as we often do, a tender is then issued and somebody objects that I've been left out. And that is in court for a year or two. And finally a hospital is built 5 years later and the virus is gone and forgotten. Then they come back to the president, they say, here's the hospital. What is it for? For the virus. Which virus is that? So this talks to that. And in some ways we laugh about it, but that is our reality. It's a reality that we have created, and some people say we over-consult, we just overcook everything that we do. And it has the unintended consequences, as I said, of delaying and derailing investments at great cost to the economy. Now, those are some of the things that we need to reflect on. There is a need for a speedy, robust, and transparent decision-making process. The public-private partnership legal environment requires revision, and innovative ideas should be accommodated in the procurement space. Some people have said that we have all these wonderful laws, like the Public Finance Management Act, which was drafted by some who are also in this room, who moved elsewhere. And it is said that the PFMA, whilst it had good intentions, now serves as a great albatross. The minister calls it impediment to progress. But some even say that what it was meant to do to stop corruption, it acts as a cover-up of corruption, because corruption has continued nonetheless. So these are some of the things that we need to have thoroughgoing discussions and debates about and find ways of resolving them, because they've tended to put the brakes on our development trajectory. Fourthly, we need to rethink the public sector financing space. In September 2018, I announced the creation of an infrastructure fund as a way of crowding in private sector participation in the rollout of public infrastructure. The infrastructure fund is still in formation. That also talks to the slow movement which we still have in government, which I have said we have to repair and reposition. But the fund in itself has two main aims. The first is to improve the quality and rate of infrastructure investment by strengthening project preparation and governance so that there is a visible pipeline of projects which everybody will be able to see, and there should be transparency in that regard. The second is to close the viability gap and provide blended finance for projects that have social and economic elements and or to address market failures. This will ensure that government strategically uses the limited fiscal resources to mobilize financing from the private sector, from development finance institutions, and multilateral development banks, who we are very pleased to have here today. The envisaged fund will have four core elements: pipeline and project preparation to address fragmentation in the preparation of feasibility studies, viability assessments, project structuring and procurement. Budget facility for infrastructure, which assesses whether large infrastructure projects are ready to be considered for funding. Thirdly, strategic intervention unit, which will facilitate the financial structuring, the procurement and implementation of priority blended finance projects and programs. And fourthly, project account, a disbursement vehicle for ring-fenced funding for projects. And fifthly, we need to revise the public sector infrastructure institutional framework as well. Functional fragmentation and institutional overlap and unclear processes, incentives and controls also tend to impede the optimal rollout of infrastructure. Now, a review of distribution of functions and roles across different institutions, optimizing processes and controls to ensure optimal infrastructure investment is also very, very critical. This will include mainstreaming the infrastructure fund into institutional and decision-making processes. Now, the recently established Investment and Infrastructure Office in the Presidency will spearhead the revision exercise with a view to ensuring better coordination and alignment and positioning the Presidency as the strategic center for investment as well as infrastructure in the country. This is one area that many stakeholders have called for. Not so much because they saw failure in other areas, but because they wanted the highest office in the country to be seen to be more focused on this important area. And it was for this reason that we had the PICC as well in the past, which did serve the country very well. I will be releasing an infrastructure investment policy statement, which, among other things, will provide an ecosystem within which good infrastructure investments, including PPPs, are undertaken, and also remove institutional confusion and create an oversight mechanism. Now, this policy will help build consensus and will be able to move us more and more towards what we've wanted to focus on, getting rid of the silo mentality in government, and to get government to work as one, and to ensure that we get rid of the fragmentation as well as a disaggregated type of government system. But it will also provide clarity to all stakeholders on how infrastructure projects should be conceived, how government support mechanisms will be structured, and how the infrastructure project life cycles will need to be streamlined. It will also provide guidance on how to mainstream fiscal commitment and contingent liability analysis and functions throughout the PPP project life cycle that ensures affordability of a project on its own and on a portfolio basis. The scale and gravity of the challenge facing our country calls for a collective South African response. The state will have to galvanize all of society behind an orchestrated, comprehensive, and bold effort to turn around the economic fortunes of our country. An aggressive public sector build program presents a plausible, immediate, and universally tested intervention to achieve the desired economic turnaround. I've therefore instructed the Investment and Infrastructure Office in the Presidency to convene a Sustainable Infrastructure Development Symposium. This will aim to produce in the immediate a suite of projects that are of national significance and enhance quality, sustainability, and capacity. They should be projects that have the potential to drive economic growth, but they should also be able to attract significant private sector investment and help in meeting the government's strategic objectives. As I indicated, the state's technical capacity is extremely limited to meet the desired outcomes that we want. So I therefore want to make the following appeal that would like all of you who are here to join us in endorsing this sustainable infrastructure development, and your mere presence here is already indicative of your willingness to do so. But we'd also like you to offer support in the efforts that we have embarked upon, particularly in the structures that we're setting up, so that those can be strengthened with participation in the form of the skills that can be made available in areas such as project screening, project preparation, leading to the type of discussions that we would like to have at the symposium, and consider funding projects presented and actively participate in updating the country's infrastructure plan. Now, this sixth administration is committed to forging, as I said, social compacts in the resolution of the challenges that are facing our country. I am encouraged by the support and goodwill from the broad spectrum of society directed at government. And one of the things that the methods that we are inculcating in government, which is beginning to lead to a change in which government approaches things, is through the district development model that we've inaugurated. And already we're beginning to see some of the benefits of this. Now, if we overlay your participation and your cooperation with us on the type of model that we have evolved, we think that this country can move forward in quite a dramatic way. And it is through this that I'm confident that as we work together with yourselves, we can move mountains, both literally and figuratively. Because it is through moving these mountains that we will be able to create infrastructure that will be of great benefit to our country, leads to greater productivity and efficiency, but at the same time leads to job creation. I want to end by saying, much as most of you are from the finance industry, it is the construction industry that has been feeling the great burden of our lack of more directed infrastructure development. And many of those companies have gone bust or are going bust because they're standing idle and not doing work. And most of them have resorted to posting their people overseas for either major infrastructure projects. And now we want to lure them back with real projects that you as finance institutions can fund together with us as we now crank up the infrastructure development in our country. I believe it can be done. We did it prior to 2010 to great effect when we invested well over R1 trillion in infrastructure. We can repeat and even surpass what we did in 2010. And South Africa stands ready now for infrastructure. In my State of the Nation address, I said that the country is longing to see yellow equipment across the landscape of our country, in provinces and in our towns. We've long last seen the cranes and the yellow equipment that are the key drivers of economic growth in any country. They need to return to South Africa. They need to be hoisted up so that we can see real development. So I'm truly delighted that we have all of you here present to participate with us in this whole effort. And we are pleased that all of you are here. Now, I'd like to thank you, therefore, for your participation, but we also like to thank our friends at the end there as they shut down their cameras and leave us so that we can now carry on with our work. Thank you very much. Now, if it was in another country, they would have left by now.
All right, you're watching reports from Cape Town. The president is meeting with the Development Finance Institution leaderships. You see CEOs of commercial banks there on your screen. Well, we did see it a bit, but the camera's a bit shaky afterwards, but you got the gist.
All right, we were not able to see the entire room, as you say, Blaine, but you imagine some of the people in attendance, your Industrial Development Corporation, your IDC, which is made for purpose in terms of developmental financing, your DBSA, which is also a development finance institution, and these institutions having been put together, established to accelerate sustainable socio-economic development in the country. But this conversation for me speaks to a conversation that we'll be going to later, the State Capture Commission, where the president was saying that they put up laws such the Public Finance Management Act that are meant to protect growth in the country, but it has been found that corruption actually finds a way to breed in those spaces.
The president has been talking about infrastructure development for a long time now, and this meeting with the CEOs and leaders of these multilateral institutions is basically to get a progress report on infrastructure investment, especially when we hear the talk, as we've been talking about, the sovereign wealth fund as well that
he spoke
the
about in the State of the Nation address.
Basically,
the big concern there is that, as he says, he was addressing these institutions today. They exist already. So the big concern is the possibility of duplication.
Well, the definition of a sovereign wealth fund is basically, it's a government-owned investment fund established with reserves and I guess national savings or national savings. And it's through targeted investments that you can, I guess, diversify portfolios and create wealth for the country. But you make a good point.
But you also get a sense that he has an appreciation of the urgency, because he was saying himself that in this particular address that he has been accused of over-consulting, and something that sometimes can create delays. And those are some of the concerns as well, that how long will it take to bring about this change in an environment where there's a need for immediate change?
Yes, and he mentioned that, you saw that on social media in terms of, he cited China building this hospital in about 10 days or so. But what happens when, South Africa takes over the reins and tries to do that, and you get all this red tape. And he was talking about, the state's technical capabilities, and it's limited. And I guess trying to remove policy bottlenecks in order to work better with the private sector is key.
And being wary of not creating more policy to create further bottlenecks. But let's go now to Parktown.